So, so what we have here are our legislative updates for 45 minutes. We've got 4 speakers. Everyone has been forewarned. They get 11 to 12 minutes each, including myself. So if you see Terry yank on me, you'll know why. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end, and then closing remarks. But basically, so I guess I'm first.
Yes.
So I'm first, and I'm watching the time here to make sure I stay within it. Very good, thank you. So basically, if you could bring that slide up.
You want me to do it from here? I thought you were
Yeah, well, it's on there. They're seeing it.
Oh, okay, they're seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. So if you all can see the slide, it's a one slide. It's serve as a reference point for what I wanted to say. So a lot went on legislatively this year here in Arizona, in general, for us in particular, and then nationally as well. And the first thing was obviously COVID, the pandemic, and it caught us all by surprise, and made us pivot and do some things differently. So I think really one of the silver linings is it enabled us to offer our services and help to the state, to health plans, to health systems, to whoever might want it. And I thought that it was very positively received. I can tell you that we reached out, and everyone really appreciated that. There were a number of collaborative efforts during the pandemic that are still ongoing. One I think I mentioned just yesterday was with the coalition that we've developed with other mental health and behavioral health associations, and we meet every couple of weeks to talk about what we can do. We've had some speakers in. We've been involved with first responders, and really the whole thing here is during a very challenging time, just getting together to talk about what we can do to make it better than then trying to do it. So yes, we've participated quite a bit in the government and in the community. I think one of the things that has really helped is we're particularly fortunate right now to have a governor and some members of the legislature who are very interested in our issues. And it has given us an opportunity to participate in ways that maybe we haven't before. So during COVID, I've had the opportunity to participate with the governor every 3 weeks or so. He has a call with anywhere from 25 to 100 business leaders across the state from all walks of life. So we're involved there with the hotels and the Grand Canyon Park and all sorts. But the whole thing is to level set, hear what's going on, and then also contribute. And one of the things that a very positive outcome in all that has been telemedicine and telepsychiatry. The governor issued an executive order in March, basically paving the way for payment for telepsychiatry as well as phone visits. And we're working on texting right now. But as he said to me a month or two back, as long as he's governor, his executive order for telemedicine will stay in place. And talking to people in Washington with CMS and also some other state people, I think that one of the silver linings of this is that the telehealth initiatives will continue post-COVID. At least a lot of them will. Several major issues that many of which you are familiar with. Opioids has been around, a recent resurgence, other drugs as well. That coupled with increased suicide rates, particularly among our youth, has brought behavioral health issues front and center. There's a lot of interest, really out of necessity. The public community is really trying to understand why is this going on? Why now? What can we do? And they're really looking to experts like us to help figure this out and pave the way. Unfortunately, we've had, the streak of violence and some issues with police violent behavior and all. And I think we've actually been on calls with different police commissioners, and they've been tremendous. I think a lot, a lot of folks want to make things better and really trying to find solutions, and things like the the training on mental health first aid and other behavioral health things with the police have really helped out quite a bit. We looked at workforce shortage issues. As you know, a lot of folks in our profession are aging out, so to speak, and it's really important that we figure out ways to attract people into psychiatry and into the mental health field. Because, at the end of the day, and I mentioned this on a call with the governor the other day, the focus on education and jobs is actually totally understandable and very important. But what I said was, if you don't have good health care and mentally or substance use wise, you're having difficulties, it's hard to focus on anything else. And those messages are really resonating in ways that they haven't, I think, before. Another issue that we're going to take up here this year is the involuntary law, and more on that later. It's archaic. It's created a lot of inequities in our system, and I know there are a lot of good people who would like to see that change in a good way. Parity was a major success this year. Jake's Law passed in February 2020, and that basically builds on the federal parity law and requires that insurers report to the Department of Insurance their compliance with the law. And it also provides a couple $100,000 this year for the Department of Insurance to hire staff to help enforce the law itself. And there are other provisions in a fairly complex bill, but those are some of the key ones. Our role has been, we've been very, very involved, very critically vital to this whole process. It's been a local effort with people like Jasleen and Gretchen and others who've been tremendous. And then Tim Clements from the National Office in the APA, who will be speaking here in a minute, has just been phenomenal and brings a level of expertise that I think our governor, his policy person, some key legislators, and even agency people have bought into, and really see Tim and us as a resource for informing them and really advocating on behalf of good behavioral health care. One of the positive things too that came out of this is we realized we needed some additional lobbying support. Joe's done a terrific job, but this topic is singular and is going to be a heavy lift this upcoming year. There are things that we're going to be working on that really build on the successes that we've had so far. Right now we're working, Tim and some of us are working with the Department of Insurance on finding the right tool to measure compliance on the payer part. So there'll be that, but there's also things like network sufficiency, prior auth activities, rates and rate setting, how all those things are done. We're going to be getting further in the weeds of parity, but it really is all in the interest. It's not just so we can get paid more. It's really supporting that behavioral health care that people actually really do need for their lives to be good and to be productive members of society. So I just, to be thorough, I listed the psychologist prescribing issue. It seems like it's not going to be that big an issue this coming year, but it's always something we got to be mindful of and watching for, and Jim may have more on that. One of the things that, there's been a lot more, as Dr. Setter said in his talk, the connection between mental health and our correctional system. Unfortunately, these days, the de facto mental health system for a large part of our country are jails and prisons. And one of the things that we were helpful in creating is a new level of care, at least in the public sector Medicaid system, that's called secure residential. And it's for people who have typically comorbid chronic psychotic disorders, substance use, and medical problems, and just can't quite stay in the same level of care. So they bounce in and out of levels of care, in and out of homelessness. And we worked with a number of advocates, peers, patients, health plan representatives and providers to develop a new model of residential care, which is a critical thing for these people, that is secure and safe for them. And then we've done a heck of a job, I think, improving communications with our world and the correctional world. And so, I failed to mention, at least I don't think I in terms of additional lobbying support, I neglected to mention we have added a new person in addition to Joe, Alexis Glasscock from Fenimore Craig. Yeah, and so we'll get her up here, but in the short time I've gotten to know her, she's a fabulous addition, very smart, very capable, a lot of experience in this arena, and determined, I can tell you. She'll fit in extremely well. We're like a dog on a bone here.
She's made a couple of times Women's Leaders of the Year list.
Very cool. So that's great. So in closing here, there's a focus on advocacy and presence. I think that what we've really tried to do in the legislature, but in the overall government and just our community, is advocate and become a presence, and become a constructive, positive presence of people who come with solutions and not hand grenades, and who really want to work with other people to make things better. And I think the response to us has been very positive, very welcoming, and and actually too very needed, because I think people realize what psychiatrists have to offer our community. I've said it a few times already. We're not the only thing, or we don't have all the answers, but what we do know, we know well, and we can certainly help others in our community understand it better and what's really needed. So,
you have mad skills, Dr. Phelps.
so anyway, we've had a great year, great couple years. Look forward to more, and with the help of a lot of people who will be speaking, and some others who are on the phone here. So thank you for the time, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
And that would be our APA Director of Legislation, Tim Clement. Thank you for joining us today, Tim.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Dr. Fowles, for that good introduction. And I think, so I'm Tim Clement. I'm Director of Legislative Development for American Psychiatric Association. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a little overview, as Dr. Fowles mentioned, about Parity. It was a major legislative victory this year here in Arizona. What I'd like to do is just give a little bit of an overview of that, a little bit about what that process looked like, what it's going to look like going forward, and then also what we've seen from other states around the country. This has become a very hot topic in the last year or two. So with that, I'll just dive into it. So first, I think when talking about parity, we always have to make sure that we know exactly what we're talking about. So parity, of course, we're talking about insurance coverage for mental health and substance use disorder. And the concept of parity, very broadly speaking, says that insurance coverage for mental health and addiction treatment should be no more restrictive than insurance coverage for any other medical condition. However, I think as many of you are quite familiar, that has historically not been the case. The good news when it comes to parity is back in 2008, as Dr. Fowles mentioned, Congress passed the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. President Bush signed it into law exactly 12 years ago today, October 3rd, 2008. And so that's the great news. The great news is it is the law of the land of the United States of America for basically every health plan except for Medicare, that insurance coverage for mental health and substance use disorder treatment must be no more restrictive than insurance coverage for all other medical care. Now, you might wonder, why are we still talking about this in 2020? Why did we need to pass a bill in Arizona about this in 2020? And the simple reason is that insurers just have not been complying with the law. And it's not out of malfeasance or reckless negligence. There's no smoke-filled back room where insurance executives and corporate attorneys plot on how they can best violate state and federal law. It's just the law itself, despite being a very complicated or a simple concept, the law itself is quite complicated. So, and the reason we know there are problems is that basically every state and federal investigation that's taken place over the last 3 or 4 years has found major problems. And a lot of those problems are in the realm of insurers' managed care practices, like prior authorization, how they design and maintain their networks, setting reimbursement rates. That's been a big one recently that the regulators have been finding problems. As you all probably know, any of you deal with insurance, that can be a very frustrating component. So the reason we're still talking about this is obviously we don't have full compliance. And one of the ways that we can get to full compliance is by passing additional legislation, both at the state and federal level. And that has been achieved here in Arizona this year, and it's been in a number of other states, which I'll talk about. There's also an effort federally right now in Congress to pass additional legislation that would require the large employer plans that states can't regulate to do something similar to what's going on in Arizona now and a number of other states. So the way this process has worked throughout the states in the last few years is that back in 2017, there was model state parity legislation that was created that would require insurers to submit information to state regulators demonstrating how it is that they do or do not comply with the very complicated components of the federal parity law as it relates to the managed care practices. Now, Tennessee was the very first state to pass that legislation back in 2017. And in addition to Arizona this year, 10 other states have passed basically identical pieces of legislation. There were 11, including Tennessee. And those states run the gamut from very liberal states like Connecticut or Colorado or New Jersey to more conservative states like West Virginia, Tennessee, Indiana, Oklahoma. Those last few states were just joined the fray this year in passing legislation. And so the way it took place here in Arizona is, every state's unique and has their own challenges. And we were very helpful to have the governor's office be a very firm supporter of this concept. We had a very strong legislative champion in Senator Kate Brophy-McGee. And so that was something that and we had a lot of allies in the advocacy community. And so we were able to get through that legislation. And, of course, we had to make some compromises, but we also got an unexpected gift, as Dr. Fowls mentioned, is the Department of Insurance was given money in the budget to specifically hire someone to work on parity within the Department of Insurance and financial institutions. I can't tell you how big of an asset that's going to be for Arizona going forward, because having myself worked with a number of state regulators on parity enforcement and implementing some of these parity laws that have been passed in recent years to help further implement the federal law, if you have a few different people from a department working on it part-time, what you end up having is no one really figures out how to do a good job. When you have one person or two or three person, but you have at least one person whose full-time job it is to focus on parity and parity enforcement, that's when you make real progress. So I think that's the biggest thing that I think Arizona has going for it, is that there is going to be a full-time parity enforcer within the Department of Insurance and financial institutions. So that's going to make, I think, a huge difference. And as Dr. Fowles mentioned, we are still with Alexis. We're very heavily involved in working with the department right now, giving them input as to what we think are the best tools they should use, what kind of information they should ask for. And I feel very confident that in the next 12 to 18 months that we're going to see a lot of progress made by the Department of Insurance on implementing the law that was just passed that requires insurers to submit those reports about their compliance. And I think that the department has been very gracious and engaging with us. And I think we'll have an opportunity, and that means not just we, that means all of you, will have an opportunity to help guide the department, help let them know what are the things they really need to look at, what are the real world problems that you're experiencing that we can then give to the department, help them understand what they need to look at it, how they need to look at it, and hopefully they can be our allies going forward. And I feel very confident that will be the case. And so just to give a little background on some of the other states that have passed the legislation, I think the great thing about these legislative pushes in the last 2 years or so is they've been very bipartisan. And the original federal parity law was a bipartisan exercise. As I mentioned, President Bush signed into law 12 years ago. Obviously President Bush, Republican. It was sponsored by Patrick Kennedy, a Democratic congressman, my former boss. He was the sponsor, so that they had a very bipartisan, and even the name of the law itself is the Paul Wellstone and Pete Domenici Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. Paul Wellstone, very liberal, Pete Domenici, very conservative. They probably didn't agree on anything except for this. So parity is a very bipartisan concept originally, and thankfully this year and last year, we've seen that bipartisan spirit return. All of the states that have passed legislation, they've been bipartisan bills. both Democratic and Republican support. Almost all of them have been unanimously supported and passed, with very few exceptions. And I believe that the mix right now of the 12 states that have passed legislation, I think 7 of them have Democratic governors and 5 of them have Republican governors. So I think we've seen that very balanced and mixed split. And I think what's most encouraging is that, we already did the hard work of making parity the law of the land 12 years ago. But now what we realize is it's even harder work to make sure that law is actually followed. And that's what's going on right now with the passage of Jake's Law and then the resulting work. And I think it's important for everyone to understand is sometimes I hear people say, well, did that law really make a difference? Did all that work to pass some legislation? What's the upshot? What's the outcome? Here, this is an issue where it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time for us to actually have a universe in which mental health and substance use disorder insurance coverage is in fact no more restrictive. But I feel for the first time, I think this year, I feel confident that we are going to get there. I first started working on this issue back in 2014, and I was very pessimistic back then in 2015 when I first started working on this. I had a feeling that we were never going to see compliance with the federal law. It's just, there's not the will out there. But because of the opioid epidemic and rising suicide death tolls, I think people recognize that you can't solve those problems without having private insurance cover diseases of the brain, just like they do any other disease. So I think that's something that people have woken up to that. Now there's a lot of enthusiasm around the country to enforce this law. There's a lot of regulatory activity by state insurance departments and state Medicaid agencies. And I think we're going to see that spirit continue here in Arizona. I'm very encouraged by the Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. There's some very smart people working on this. They're going to hire a full-time person and we'll have input to that person. So I think that we've taken a dramatic step forward with Jake's Law, with the funding in Jake's Law. And I think Arizona is positioned just as well as any state in the country right now, I think, to actually make sure that we get the full promise of parity at some point within the next few years. And I think that that's going to happen. So I think that we made significant progress this year with Jake's Law. There's still a lot of work to do, but I feel very confident that work is going to get done and it's going to get done well. So I think we're positioned very well here in Arizona, and thanks to the brilliant leadership of APS, Dr. Fowls, Terry, of course, Joe, and I know Alexis is going to be helping us a lot going forward, and we're very grateful for that. So I'll wrap up there and just say that I think it's been a very good year in terms of parity implementation in this country, and particularly in Arizona. So with that, I will pass the baton.
Sorry. It's our pleasure to have a report from our APA State Advocacy Group, our Regional Field Director, Marsi Thrash. And I think, Marsi, you have co-host rights, so you can share your screen.
I do. Thank you so much, Terry. And thanks for having me here. I wish I was with you in person, but glad to be here. Wanted to just kind of share a few slides with you tonight and give you sort of a regional, national, and federal overview of some things that are happening within the APA. So tonight I'm going to go over, like I said, a federal update and then some hot topics statewide in telemedicine, scope of practice, and parity. If you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat box. We're going to go over some APA advocacy and grassroots resources so that you're aware of what's available as your member benefits, and then also give a wrap up of the state advocacy conference that was held last week. So this is one of my favorite slides to share. It always tickles me. And just when you talk about, having a lobbyist and what a lobbyist is and what they do and what they think they do and what others think we do. So I just share that with you for a little Saturday chuckle. So to give you an overview, if you're not familiar with the State Regional Directors Program, about 5 years ago, the Government Relations Department redesigned itself a little bit and put some field directors into the regions. So I actually don't live in DC. I don't work in DC. I live in South Carolina and work amongst my region. So I cover all the states that are in yellow. And my job, along with my counterparts who are based in the red states and the blue that you see up on the screen. One of my coworkers is based in Chicago. Another does so happen to live in DC, but that's also part of her territory. We provide resources to the local district branches, the local lobbyists, if you have them, which you have a fabulous now set of lobbyists, and whatever we can do to provide assistance, and I'll go into greater detail about that later, but just to give you an idea of how the country's broken up amongst us regional directors. So on the federal update, you'll notice that a lot of what I'm going to talk about in the state is running a parallel track with the federal, and that's not an unusual tactic that we do, because the states tend to move much quicker than the federal government does. So on the telehealth front, the current waiver that we are lobbying for with our federal team is to keep the payments and the parity and the coverage permanent from what's been happening during the pandemic for at least a year. We're also advocating them to conduct a study to continue to collect data to understand the impact of the changes on telehealth, and then also to exempt mental health from any geographic and site of service restrictions. On the parity front, asking federally to encourage support of House Bill 7539, and then we're encouraging on the Senate side to encourage sponsorship of 1737. And then on the health inequities section, we are looking at the House bill that was passed and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my glasses. I'm gonna switch out. I apologize. I'm not sure what's going on there. That's much better. Increase the amount of research relating to racial and ethnic disparities in physical and mental health, promoting training to students, and parents, and teachers. So we know that health inequities has been a longstanding problem, so we're happy to see that there's been some significant movement there. Scope of practice, y'all have probably heard, we call it the 2 bill, and we are encouraging members to contact their representatives to oppose HR 884, which is called the Medicare Mental Health Access Act, and it would inappropriately add psychologists to the definition of physician under the Medicare program. So you can access the tools that we have under the CAN program on the APA Advocacy Grassroots page, which I do have a link to later on in the slides. And then lastly, under funding, looking to ensure that the next round of COVID packages include at least $4.5 billion for SAMHSA and direct billions of dollars in needed funds to mental health and substance abuse disorder providers. So those are some of the things that are going on the federal track. The Congressional Advocacy Network and APAC are very, very important programs that you can join, donate to the PAC. You can get federal action alerts right into your inbox. By joining CAN, click on the link that I've provided. And then if you just want to subscribe to action alerts, you can do that as well with the link that I've provided. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to ask. On the state side, we have worked with Tim Clement, who you just heard from, to devise legislation that is specifically designed for each and every state. So I've provided a link if you'd like to look at your state, or if you're interested in what another state's legislation might look like, that is there for your use. And then also to keep up with the latest trends in telepsychiatry, Nate Tatro out of our policy department does a fantastic job with his blog, so you might want to check that out if this is an area of interest to you. So like I said, we're running parallel tracks with the states and the federal government, and some focus of ours is to maintain the audio only for certain populations and maintain the payment parity. Going on to psychologist prescribing, the states in blue are states that we've seen bills introduced in their past session. They have been either defeated, or some states are year-round legislatures, so they are still going on. Texas's was defeated. They were not in session this past year. We do expect it to come back next year. States in red is where legislation has passed, but we're really only seeing prescribing happening in the old favorites of Louisiana and New Mexico. Florida narrowly defeated. We do expect that to come back next year. That was a really, really ugly battle. West Virginia was another interesting battle, but the sponsors, we've had 2 sponsors in a row and they keep losing their elections. So we do expect that they'll find a third sponsor next year, but remains remains to be seen. We haven't heard too much noise just yet. So that's just sort of a lay of the land of what's going on with the psychologist prescribing battles. I won't go into the Parity in much detail since Tim did such a fantastic job of telling you everything you probably want to know. But just to give you an idea of the activity nationwide, it is a very, very busy topic area with a ton of interest, and we're pursuing things in all different fashions. Specifically looking at the yellow states is where we're doing things in a regulatory fashion where the legislation was deemed not necessary. So we are close to getting Texas and Louisiana put to bed. So those are soon to be, I guess, maybe they'll turn red. I guess we'll just keep classifying them as yellow since it was done regulatory, but a lot of exciting activity on that front as well. So advocacy tools that you have at your disposal with the APA, and these are something that you can come through Terry or come to me for. We're happy to do analysis and education on any particular piece of legislation that is filed, or if you get your hands on a draft. Happy to help you with building relationships with legislators. I always like to point out how you all are so successful with your patients because of your relationships and your ongoing dialogue with them. And the same is different nothing is different with any other relationships in life, including with your legislators. And it might seem daunting, it might seem difficult or just sometimes fuzzy. How do I do that? And really just sometimes picking up the phone and introducing yourself. It's funny with COVID that you wouldn't be able to maybe go meet for a cup of coffee like you used to, but definitely they are used to building relationships in this sort of new age of Zoom and telephones again. So don't be shy about keeping in contact with them. Even just introduce yourself and let them know that I'm a psychiatrist in your district, and if there's anything about mental health that I can help you with, I'd like to be a resource for you. And they're going to call who they know when they need an opinion, because they can't be educated on everything. A lot of the members of the legislature are not in the healthcare field, so they definitely need your expertise. We can help with allies and coalitions. You all have such great experience with working in that field. But if there are new issues that come up, we can definitely help you partner. I know Dr. Fowls mentioned involuntary commitment. There are other groups that you might not see as your normal allies, like judges, who really don't want to put people in jail. They want to put people somewhere else, but they don't always have the legal authority to do so. So you sometimes end up with interesting partners. So we're more than happy to help you find those and help glue those together. So targeted in social media, if we can help you with whether it's an op-ed or social media, we do have a comms department, and we're more than happy to arrange training or answer specific questions. And storytelling, I can't emphasize enough, legislators need your stories. They want to know your stories, and they will retell your stories. So don't be shy about sharing those as well. Just a laundry list of some of the resources that we do have: action alerts, like I said, media training. We can help with testimony preparation if you are going to the Capitol, and issue specific training if there's something new that comes up. We're more than happy to help. And we just had a state advocacy conference last Saturday. We had nearly 150 attendees from APA membership, and we had panels that included legislators, telemedicine, and social justice. And then we had an election update from a gentleman from NCSL. It was open to all members and DB execs and their lobbyists, and we are offering follow-up sessions to those who attended coming up in October. So with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, Joe.
Hello there. Good afternoon. You all can hear me? What I wanted to spend a little time talking about this recent past session of the legislature, which was certainly unique in the annals of Arizona legislative history because of COVID-19. Only 90 bills were enacted into law. Usually there's about 350 bills that pass through the process and are enacted. So it was quite something. As they say in the biblical terms, many were called, but few were chosen. And one of the things that, besides Parity, which obviously we spent most of our time on, and that was of utmost importance, we, like other healthcare groups, worked on a few other pieces of legislation and supported. One of them that did pass was House Bill 2668 that restored provider reimbursement funding that was rates that were lost in the 2008 deep recession in Arizona and nationwide. And we finally got a restoration of those rates for the first time. And also, the bill also allowed the hospitals to continue their assessments to help fund the Medicaid expansion program. So that was a major piece of legislation that a lot of us in the healthcare community worked on. Another bill that passed that we supported was Senate Bill 1445 that provided suicide prevention training for school counselors and social workers in the schools. Suicide prevention is a very key issue for us and for others in the behavioral health community. It's a serious problem, and this hopefully will be of some help. Another bill that was passed that we did follow was Senate Bill 1397 that in case the Affordable Care Act was ruled unconstitutional by the courts later on this year, Arizona has adopted by statute the pre-existing condition requirements on individual insurance contracts. And so that was done as a precaution. And that's one that we did support. There were a few pieces of legislation that we followed and a couple of pieces that we really supported that didn't make it through the process. Keep in mind the session was cut short in really mid to late March. 2 more weeks of hearings were supposed to take place that did not take place. So, so some things fell through the cracks that we may see back next year. A couple of them, or 2 or 3 of them. One is the requirement, House Bill 2420, some regulation that a lot of the patient advocacy groups supported to put some safeguards in the area of step therapy and insurance contracts and dealing with patients, and putting some more requirements on the insurance companies to side more with the patients and working out the step therapies that are needed for the patient in the formularies. That bill had passed the House, but it was in negotiations with the insurance companies and provider groups when everything collapsed because of COVID-19. I assume that will be back again next year. Another bill that I know Arma and Oma worked and we supported, actively supported, was House Bill 2532, which for the first time would require under law standardized prior authorization forms for physicians to supply to the insurance companies. And that would, something that we've talked about and has been discussed for years. And this would help. Prior authorizations is a real problem for many physicians with insurance companies and patients, of course. And this will be a good first step in providing some uniformity and maybe speeding up that process. Another bill that unfortunately didn't make it was, I think was Representative Shaw's bill to make it an aggravated assault if someone assaulted a healthcare worker. And that's something that we all in the healthcare community supported. That'll be back next year. There was another issue that we followed on the Psychiatric Review Board, which was continued by statute this year for another 8 years, but there was some legislation, some controversy with the board. There was one bill, I think sponsored by Representative Bartow, that would get rid of the board and have the courts do most of the board's existing duties. And there was another bill that made some modifications to the board, and So this issue, I think, may come back again next year. And so this is one that we've been following. As I said, we only had 90 bills that passed. We thought after the end of May, we'd go back in special session in June to do the budget. The legislature passed what was called a skinny budget in March before they left the first time, and thinking that we would have to come back in June to do further cuts because of COVID-19 and the resultant drain on our budget and the economy. Surprisingly, and of course, I think it's been borne out in Arizona right now. We've done better than almost any other state in the union as far as our economy goes. And our budget is probably in the best shape of almost any other state accordingly. We thought that there would be, in fiscal year 20, which just ended June 30th, a deficit of $190 million. Well, it turned out it was now a $377 million surplus for this past fiscal year. Amazing. We thought, again, in the end of May, that the upcoming fiscal year 21, we'd have at least maybe a $1.1 billion deficit. As it turned out right now, the latest figure showed we may only have a deficit of $62 million, which is kind of peanuts compared of, we have $1 billion in a rainy day fund to take care of contingencies, and certainly our economy is, compared to other states, is fairly well off and doing much better. So that's a real plus. As far as, I want to talk a minute about the upcoming elections. There's a couple of ballot propositions that will be on the ballot, initiatives that be on the ballot. One to legalize recreational marijuana. That was narrowly defeated a couple years ago by a few thousand votes statewide. That's up again and is probably expected to pass. Then another bill, more controversial and more opposition, the teachers union and others in the educational community proposed initiative that would raise our state income tax from 4.5% at the high rate to 8% for individuals and businesses that make over $250,000 a year, and a joint account, husband and wife, of over $500,000. And the State Chamber of Commerce and the NFIB and the small business community that will impact the most by this are actively opposing it, and it remains to be seen what will happen to it. But that's real controversial. This next month, you'll be probably watching the airways and seeing a lot of commercials, one way or the other, on this issue. The elections, I think the prognosis is, as far as our legislative races, I mean, right now it's fairly close, and who knows what's happened the last couple of days that would affect things, given the president's illness. But I think it's fair to say that Biden was slightly ahead in this state at this point, and Mark Kelly, the Democratic candidate for Senate, was significantly ahead by several points over the incumbent. McSally. As far as the legislature is concerned, which is our prime interest, it looks like for the first time since 1966 election, and that was when one man, one vote was instituted, the Democrats may very well take control of the Arizona House of Representatives for that first time. And it may, right now it's 31-29 Republican, and it could very well be 32, 33 seats for the Democrats after all said and done. In the Senate right now, it's 17-13 Republican, and it could very well be 16-14 Republican or 15-15. So that there's a couple, 2 or 3 close races that could go either way that could make a significant difference in the outcome, of course. So there could be some really significant changes, a lot of new committee chairmen, regardless, in the House and Senate, and leadership. So it'll be interesting times. It's going to be interesting to see if you have a split legislature or whatever, how they're going to operate, whether it will still be a virtual hearings and virtual legislature. I think if the House is Democratic, that's what it will be, because the vaccinations will not be widely disseminated by most of the session. And so we could have a very kind of streamed down session because of that. And the Senate as well. Just going to see how people react to things. But the polls show that a lot of folks are not going to be rushing to take the vaccine, even if it comes out in January. And so it's going to take several months before this this goes through the process. And so, I think it will impact next session of the legislature as well. We've talked about, others have talked about advocacy, and I want to encourage you to join the legislative committee and sign up for the Arizona RTS system that allows you to sign up and make comments for hearings. That's going to be more important if we have more of a virtual hearing process. Obviously, you've heard me talk about meeting with your elected legislator, and you heard mention about the AP's advocacy alerts, and also encourage you to contribute to the APA PAC, but also contribute to your local legislator and to the ARMA PAC or the AMA PAC and other groups that are out there, because that is so important. You've heard me give the talk so many times about getting involved in the process, that politics is not a dirty word, that you need to be involved. And again, I'll end my remarks about my favorite quote about politics from the philosopher Raymond Molley, who said, "Politics brings the legislature. Politics is not something to avoid or abolish or destroy. It is a condition like the atmosphere we breathe. It is something to live with, to influence if we wish, and to control if we can. We must master its ways, or we shall be mastered by those who do." Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Very, very good comments and great comments from everyone. At this time, we can open it up to questions from the membership.
Dr. Fowles, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment from Dr. Alexander. Compliments to you on a fantastic job. Thank you for arranging such a great panel of speakers today and for your tremendous accomplishments as our president this year. And thanks from our attendees to our full panel, and a direct thanks to you, Joe, from Dr. Powers.
Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate it.
Joe, I know I want to offer for anyone who hasn't heard this spiel before that the RTS system is a pretty easy way for you to contribute your input on legislation at the state capitol. And you can, once we have an account set up for you, you can do it from your home or your office. You do not have to make that trip to the capitol. And we are glad to help set up that account for you so that you can be an active participant in commenting a position of opposed or in support on key legislation.
Yeah, and Terry's been great about helping folks to get involved and get that set up. And it's so important, especially now, given our virtual hearings circumstance. It's a system that everyone could use fairly easily, and it's very effective.
Is Alexa still on? Can you tell?
Dr. Fowles, I'm still on.
Okay, yeah. Well, since we have a few minutes, maybe you could just introduce yourself and say a couple words real quick.
Sure, absolutely. I am so honored to be part of your team and to be working with you on implementing Jake's Law. My background is I started with the legislature several decades ago, and as counsel for the current president of the Senate at that time, John Green, and I just loved it. I love policy and trying to advocate for my clients on issues that are critical to success. So I was down there for about 7 years, and then took a break raising kids, and have now been back 7 years. And so I can't say enough about how impressed I am by your organization. All the work that you accomplished last year was phenomenal on Jake's Law. So a lot of that heavy lifting is going to make this year so much easier. Still a lot of challenges ahead, but very exciting because of what you've accomplished and what Joe worked on so hard these past years. So appreciate being part of the team. Thank you.
And we are glad you're a part of it too, let me tell you.
And I want to make one selfish plug to say that all that work supported by our legislative committee, Dr. Fowles. So we're always looking for members to join
Absolutely.
the legislative committee. And it's we're very grateful to that chair, Dr. Gretchen Alexander, for her contributions as our legislative committee chair.
Yeah, let me second that too. Gretchen's done a phenomenal job and really knows what she's doing and runs a great group. And for those of you who might have any interest, we'd love to have you participate. It's been, I'll tell you what, it's been a lot of fun. Even when you think it's not, you get going, and we've had some really good successes. You get to meet a lot of good people, and you realize there's a lot you can contribute, so you can't beat that. So we'd love to have, and anyone who wants to join and help out, for sure.
Any questions?
Well, I think we, it's late in the day and everything here too. So I think we can bring our legislative update to a close, and thank you everyone who joined in and made that a good session. And so I guess we can bring our meeting to a close here with the last few comments.
Closing comments, last official.
Right, it says it right here, closing comments. We won't hold those up. Anyway, again, thank you all for joining today and participating. We actually had a great turnout. I think the speakers were phenomenal, and the questions, the give and take was really good. We really, appreciate that very much. And, and you've got, as I've said through the last 2 days, you got a great person in Jasleen coming in. So we look for great things there. And look, this meeting gives us an opportunity to get together and come together at least once a year. And it's really more important now than ever. The issues that we have addressed for years have now become really important to our community and our country. And a lot of people who were not affected by these before have been affected by them and are now more than curious. They're, in some instances desperate and really do need our help and are looking for it. So your membership in our organization, your support is incredibly important, and your participation and leadership are too. I don't think any one of us has all the answers, that I know, and it really does take, a group of us working together to make things happen. So, at the end of the day, our society is what we create and make it. And, I think we've come a long way these last couple of years. Great involvement from our residents and fellows and early career folks, and the existing membership that's been around for a while as well. And so we've got a great group, a great start on some things. and just encourage you to get involved in the ways that you can. You know, we need your help. Your community needs your help. And I think, you know, just by way of reminder, you know, what we're going to be focused on this, you know, and this can change, of course, but, you know, through our strategic planning was really membership, advocacy, and parity, with finance thrown in there as well. But those are the things that we're really going to, you know, be looking at. And it has been a, you know, a pleasure working with you all. I really appreciate the time, and look forward to continuing the work in some of the ways here. So God bless and Godspeed, and I'll turn it over to Terry here.
The final matter of housekeeping is you all want to know how to claim your CME for the meeting. There are instructions already posted on our virtual meeting website. At the very end of the day, under the event schedule, is the link to the CME evaluation. Just remember to get a certificate for that CME. You need to complete the evaluation within 60 days. And I hope that you're getting our emails and communications and staying in touch, and that you'll stay involved. Your membership is greatly appreciated, as is all that you do in our community. And thank you again for the humbling surprise for me. I told my husband I might have a job on Monday, so I have a job.
You have a job and an award.
A job and an award. Thank you all. Thanks for the job that you do.
And with that, we'll bring our meeting to a close. And thanks again, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you.